Friends of the Library for putting on this presentation today, and I want to introduce you to Larry Horrigan from the Grand Valley Caps and Balls. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to cover the history of the firearms in the Great Lakes during the fur trade. It starts back in the early 1600s and goes to 1840. I don't have all the guns, but I have a very good selection. We're going to timeline this. We're going to start early and work our way late. If you have any questions, please just raise your hand. This is the earliest firing mechanism I have. This is called a matchlock. This goes back to the 1400s. This particular gun dates to 1675. It's copied off an original. All these, let's just clarify that right now. All of these are copied off originals. So we don't have to say that again. Matchlock firing system, you load it like any other muzzle loader, powder, patch, ball, down, push it all the way down. Always push the ball all the way down. If you have an airspace between your charge and your round, you could burst the barrel. You don't want to burst the barrel. In matchlock, we have quite a large pan. That's where your prime goes. Close your cover. When you acquire the target, this is braided cotton cord, boiled in potassium nitrate or saltpeter. You're ready to shoot, open the pan, acquire the target, boom. This firearm does not have a trigger, it has what's called a tiller. This is the French version of this gun. The English had the same exact gun except for one thing. They had a trigger and trigger guard. The French had a tiller. I prefer the tiller. You have more control. This is the oldest style firearm that we have. This is called a wheel.
Question on the matchlock. So before they left camp, would they just light the cord and leave that smoldering all day, or would they be carrying it?
You can. It burns at the rate of 3 inches an hour.
Oh,
when I went hunting with it this fall, I didn't light it until I saw the deer, and just lit it, waited for him to come to me, and boom. Sir.
I had a sort of a question along the same lines. I was thinking, like, say you fired the gun, and I realize there's, takes some time to reload, but would that wick, if you will, still be burning, or would they extinguish that? And
You could either extinguish it, or I've come up with a safety protocol for our gun club. For safety, after you fire the gun, you take the match out of the serpentine, you leave it at the firing line, you go back to the bench and load, you come back, prime, then you put the slow match back into the serpentine. You don't want to load the gun with the match lit. That's a big no-no, because a certain amount of powder is going to escape through the hole in the side of the barrel called the touch hole. If that comes into contact with your slow match for any reason whatsoever, you're going to be left-handed. So, yeah, never is a long time, never load this style firearm with a slow match in the serpentine. Any other questions on the matchlock? Okay, wheel lock. This particular gun dates to 1650. The firing mechanism goes all the way back to 1505. Leonardo da Vinci had a drawing of this mechanism. By 1515, they were manufacturing these and using these on a regular basis. This gun is in the collection because Champlain and Nicolet, who were French explorers, were said to have carried a wheel lock. As a matter of fact, Champlain, when he fought with the Hurons against the Iroquois, he used his wheel lock. And not only did he use his wheel lock, but he quadruple balled it. The first people to leave the Iroquois encampment were 4 chiefs. When he fired, 3 of them fell. Now that's another safety protocol. If you're going to load more than 1 ball, 1 bore size, 2 undersize, 1 bore size. That way you don't have a air pocket, and the balls won't do what they call hydraulic, where you get air in between the rounds and it pushes the top ball up. Once again, we'd have airspace between the round and your charge, and you still don't want that. So once again, you load this like any other muzzleloader.
Sorry to interrupt you, I gotta ask, if you have multiple round balls in there, then would you increase the powder charge?
Nope. You know why? You're going to find yourself on the ground. Yeah.
So it's just a slower, it would slow down
Slow
all
down
of them,
overall
but
velocity.
Yeah, they'll all go.
distance.
They're all going to go, but yeah, we don't want to up your charge. As a matter of fact, there's a firearm that they used during the American Revolution called a knock-volley gun. It had like 8 barrels, individual barrels. And they chain fired. They all went off pretty much at the same exact time. You only wanted to put about 30 grains of powder in each barrel. Because 30 times 8 is 240 grains of powder. Once again, you'll find yourself on the floor. So that's why we don't do a higher powder charge.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. All right, the wheel lock is very unique. I was at a show this last weekend. I had reenactors come to my table just to see the wheel lock. They had read about them, they'd seen pictures of them, they'd never seen one in person. The wheel lock is unique in that there's a tool called a spanner that fits onto the square lug. Turn it until it locks. You have a detent in the back where your sear drops in and holds it in place. Put your prime in the pan, close the pan cover. When you acquire your target, you pull the cock down on top of the pan cover. When you pull the trigger, there's a lot going on here. When the tumbler comes around, it's going to kick that pan open, allowing the flint or the iron pyrite to drop down onto the wheel, creating a spark, igniting your charge. All that's happening in half a second. So fast you cannot see it with the naked eye. The drawback to the wheel lock system, they're very complicated. In a Flintlock lock, you've got 7 parts. In the Matchlock, you've got 3. In the wheel lock, you have 14. There's a lot that can go wrong. And they're very fussy. After you shoot it, you have to pull the lock out, pull the lock apart to clean it. Because if you get soot behind this wheel, it will not allow the sear to drop into the detent, making it useless. it's a very, very fussy firearm to own. Any questions on the wheel lock? Good. True flintlock firing system was invented by the French in 1615. Prior to that, there was a number of other firing systems. We covered the matchlock, we covered the wheel lock. There's also snap-ons. The snap-ons came very, very close to this system, but there was no pan cover. Your frizzen, this is the frizzen right here, covers your prime. And they say you won't go off half cock, your gun won't go off on half cock. Put it on full cock. What's happening now? Pull the trigger. This is the flint, French amber flint to be exact. When the flint strikes the frizzen, which is hardened, it'll shave microscopic pieces off, creating spark, dropping into the pan where your prime is, igniting your main charge to the touch hole. Just like that. This is the earliest flintlock that I have right now. This dates to around 1699. I had the privilege of handling the original to this. One of my collector friends has the original, and he allowed me to handle it, measure it, photograph it. So 2 years later, I walked up and said, "How'd I do?"
Yeah.
This style of firearm is called a feces at 3, or a trade gun. Who knows what they were trading? Who were they trading with?
Indians.
They were trading with the natives, yes. What was the currency of the time? Which fur in particular?
Beaver.
Beaver. Beaver is the monetary value of everything. Everything's based on the beaver. All furs had value, but everything was based on the beaver. So if you had 10 muskrats equal 1 beaver.
Were the muskrats, you think, larger back then?
No. Same muskrat we got today. Now, I want to clear something up right here, right now. There is a misconception out there. I hear it all the time. It is completely false. Everyone thinks that barrels were so long because they had to stack beaver up that high to buy that gun. Nothing could be further from the truth. If somebody says that to you, tell them to read a book. You could buy this gun for 12 beaver. I don't care how you stack them, they're not going to reach this high. The barrel length had everything to do with accuracy. The three main reasons for a longer barrel on a PC. First, the longer barrel, the better setting picture you have. Second, the powder that they had back then, it was not a graded powder like we have today. When I go buy powder, I buy 2F, 3F, or 4F. They didn't have graded powder like we have today. So the longer the barrel, the better chance you have at burning your entire powder chart. All but one of these guns is a smoothbore. Smoothbore reigned in the Great Lakes. You could fire rounds or you could fire shot. So the longer the barrel, the better chance you have at hitting your target, keeping your pattern tight. over a shorter barrel, which we will get to.
How accurate was, or how reliable was gunpowder in those days?
As long as you kept it dry, it was perfectly fine. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to feed yourself or defend yourself.
So if they were loading shot, how would they pack it in to keep it from rolling out?
Good question, thank you. Powder goes in first always. Then you put a wad of some sort. It can be a pre-cut wad, it can be leaves, it can be grass, it can be anything. Just to keep the shot and the powder. I have in the past made pre-packaged shot cartridges out of telephone book paper, very, very thin. You make what they call a cartridge. It's wrapped around a dowel and then folded on the ends, pour your shot in. When you're ready, you push that down, rip the tail off, push the whole business down, boom. You can load it as fast or faster than you can around. The only drawback to that is you want to make sure that you're on your target. I did that squirrel hunting one time, and fortunately I was right on, but when I retrieved my squirrel, there was a hole behind the shoulder about as big as my thumb. Cartridge didn't open up. So if I'd have missed, I'd have wondered why, because it was only about 15 yards.
So at the period, what were they using as a cartridge holder?
They could have used cartridges, but chances are they probably didn't. The cartridge didn't come into, it was more of a military thing. So your French and Indian War, your American Revolution, like that. I've got friends that literally pick up leaves or grass, cram it down over their powder, pour their shot in, put more leaves or grass over the top of it, and they're amazingly accurate that way. For thumbs. So, any more questions on this gun? All right, this is called le fusil buccaneer, or the buccaneer. This has not a thing to do with piracy. We're going to cover that. In the 1600s, the French and the Spanish shared the island of Tortuga. The French sailors were put on shore to hunt the wild swine and cattle that the Spanish had left there during the early exploration time as an exit strategy, so they had food on the way back home. There was no natural predators on this island for either the cattle or the swine. So the French sailors were put on shore with these long-barreled ship's guns that were used to snipe rigging from the crow's nest of the ships. The only way they had to preserve the meat was a term that they used yet today. Professional chefs use the term to bocane the meat, or to smoke the meat. So the hunters became known as le boucanier. The long-barrel ship's guns became known as le fusil boucanier. Spain did not want to share the island of Tortuga with France. So they sent their own hunters onto the island, and they did what the Americans did to the Western natives. They slaughtered everything on four legs, taking away the livelihood of the boucanier. So they took to privateering, piracy. They used small boats that you could sail or row, and they would go out at dusk and at dawn. Who do you imagine they went after first? The Spanish galleons. All the other ships got through except for the Spanish. And they asked the Spanish, who's attacking you? We're getting through there unscathed. The buccaneer, the buccaneers. That's why it's a term for piracy yet today. This firearm is very unique in that the club butt style. This particular one would have been made in Toul, France, T-U-L-L-E. It's pronounced Toul. All the boucaniers were a club butt style. I've made 6 different ones already. Every single one of them is a club butt. Long barrel, once again, for accuracy, they're shooting from the rigging, sniping the quarter decks of the opposing ships. Everyone wants to think you've got to dig a hole in the ground to load this. Nope. Kick it off to the left, you're right-handed. Pour your powder down, patch and ball. Push it down. Of course, you're going to have to sign up for 3 shooting positions if you're shooting on the range. Prime. Boom. The Fusil Buccaneer. This particular gun dates to right around 1709. French made 2 kinds of trade guns. The fusil de trade, fusil de chasse. This is the 1716 model of the fusil de chasse. Fusil de chasse means trade gun, or hunting gun. Hunting gun. These were mass-produced for the trade with the natives. It's a little bit shorter barrel, depending on the contract. They had each contract between the government and the supplier. The barrel length was different on every contract. This particular one, being as early as it is, you still have the older style hardware on the trigger guard. Side plate is coming into what it will be known to be. Butt plate is completely different. And typically on the fusil de chasse, you would have a wedding band right here where the octagon and the round come together. They did start doing that, but not until 1720. This is a 1716, so it will not have the wedding band. These were very, very common, very common. And if you look at the lock, it says "à Toul," at Toul. So we know that this firearm would have been manufactured at Toul. Toul started in business in 1691. Prior to that, the firearms were made at Saint-Étienne. So there's a number of different markings that you can look up, but they all have Toul. So there's not a whole lot to say. It's just a basic hunting gun.
How were they mass producing their barrels? Like, what was the manufacturing process on the barrels? Are they wrapped or?
They were hammered, forged over a mandrel, and yeah, we can cover that right now. Here they show the gunsmith working a barrel, and his apprentice is turning this large wheel. They're grinding the outside of the barrel to shape. Similar methods to do the bore, to ream the bore. And then a few pages prior to that, we have one page prior to that, they're proofing the barrels. They would double charge them, double ball them. If they passed the proofing, they were sent out. If they didn't pass the proofing, the company that manufactured the firearms were held responsible monetarily. And there's some contracts that a full third of the barrels failed. So they have these firearms that are already manufactured, completely manufactured. The barrel fails. Now they have to ship the whole gun back. Now they've got to make a barrel to fit the stock. It's backwards to the whole building process. Well, whose fault is it? Okay. This one will get us to 1730. Sir?
My terminology might be off here, but I'm just curious, like the trade guns in general, what caliber?
Okay, that is a good question.
Good, different uses, different game.
Well, the most average caliber for your hunting guns was a 62 caliber or a 20 gauge. Military guns were 69 caliber or a 16 gauge. The smallest caliber that was common was 54 or 28 gauge. So that is a good question. If you've got a firearm, and I'm not saying that if it's a 69, it's got to be a military gun. No, that's not necessarily true at all. Probably military, but not necessarily so. So most of these are 62, except for the Matchlock, that's a 69. Your QC buccaneer, those were typically 72, 75. Yeah, they're really pounded. This one is a 1730 QC-3, and this is another. This is they had different grades of QC-3. The average QC-3, like this one, there's really nothing extravagant about it. We'll just leave it at that. This one has carving on the barrel, more moldings, and this would be thin or fine. Oh, actually, this one doesn't have Arista-sketches, so this would be a demi-thin or half fine. If you have a silver wrist medallion, then it's thin, along with the other. It's not the hardware that you have on the gun that ups the grade. It's the work that goes into the gun after it's assembled. Your moldings up the barrel channel, your moldings up the ramrod channel, moldings from the tang, moldings from the lock mortise side plate, and comb, along with engraving and carving on the barrel. This one is approximately the same time period, 1730, 1740. This one is stocked in English walnut or European walnut. And this one does have the silver wrist medallion, so this would be PC thin. On the French guns, which everything on this table happens to be French, because believe it or not, right now you're standing in New France. French claimed all the Great Lakes and the whole Mississippi. The one thing you'll notice on the French guns, on all the French guns, where the comb comes down and meets the wrist, it doesn't form a straight line, it copes in on all of them. So if you see a modern manufacturer and they come right straight down, it's either a restock or it's poorly done.
Was there a reason or just aesthetics?
Aesthetics. Aesthetics. The last French gun, just another piece of the thread. You can date a gun by the hardware that's on the gun. That's how you date a specific firearm. Every one of this particular gun, this is a 1750. This is the last piece of thread that they imported prior to the French and Indian War, which the French failed to win. So everything became British. We're going there next. The trigger guards that I have here on this table, the timeline. This trigger guard dates to 1660s. I had the pleasure of getting into the archives at Fort Michilimackinac, where I identified a fragment of that trigger guard for them. They just knew it was part of a trigger guard. They didn't know what they had. And then it goes to this style, which is 1680. And don't carve that date in stone because it goes before and after. This one will get you from 1700 to 1730. 1730, 1740. This is 1750. This is the original 1750. And there's an original from 1760. If you want to date a firearm, you look at the hardware, and that's going to tell you a lot. Now, that being said, during the American Revolution, France helped the American cause by donating 30,000 used firearms from the previous war, the French and Indian War. This particular book covers Flintlock followers of that time period. A full third of the firearms in here are sporting French hardware. American gun builders could no longer get gun parts from Great Britain because they were having all the tests. So they were stripping these old firearms that the French donated and remanufacturing American followers out of them. Chances are they're stocked in either cherry or curly maple, which the French didn't use. A gun can only be as old as its newest part. So I work with collectors, and you want to see a collector get upset. I bought this gun because it's dated to X, and no, it's not, because that part is newer than the date you're calling it. Well, that's what they said. Je suis très désolé, I'm sorry.
Did they modify some similar to like ARs? Like, do they modify them? Do we see any of that in history? Did they kind of just
Only when things wore out.
Okay.
Other than that, they had no good reason to.
Okay.
Well,
So they
the
would just go about it
modification, the modification that you're talking about happened much later, like right at the end of the fur trade, when percussion firing system came into being.
Okay.
They were converting a lot of the flintlocks to percussion. They cut the pan off, they'd take the prison off.
Good.
They
Like
would put a drum into the touch hole and replace the flintlock cock with a percussion cock. And now, people like me are converting them back.
Okay.
So, yeah, that is a very good point. Thank you. Sir?
I don't wanna get you offline, I was just curious, from the guns you've talked about so far.
Yeah.
As far as, and maybe this is a modern term in relation to those, but like the bluing process on the barrels, I'm just curious,
Typically, if you had a blued barrel,
or a brown,
they,
I've heard that term.
yes, these were more brown. A lot of times, it just happened because
Oxidation or?
you're up country. I mean, where are you going to store your gun? You know, the major means of transportation back then was by canoe. The rivers and lakes are the highways. So, and I've done that. I've paddled the Great Lakes in my canoe. That's a whole nother program. I didn't say I was bright. All right, so the French lost French and Indian War. The British took over. The natives wanted the same firearm that they'd been trading with the French. So the answer was the Wilson gun building family in England came up with the Wilson Fowler. Same stock configuration, which is called the pied de vache, or the cow's foot stock configuration, with all English hardware. This one happens to be a left-hander. I made it for a customer who's yet to pick it up. But the hardware is indeed different. And they did have left-handed firearms then too. They weren't prolific, but they had. So this is what the English answered to that little problem. Then just a few short years later, after the English fought so hard to win the United States, yeah.
Sorry.
All right.
So in terms of like quality and value, what was the shift from the French to the British manufactured
The
flintlocks?
English didn't do as much grading of the firearms like the fusil fin, fusil demi fin, that kind of went away. They were just putting as many guns out there so they could get more furs. I mean, everything was based on the beaver yet. It doesn't change. There was a short time period of about 18 years from like 1698 to 1714, where the French no longer wanted the beavers. They had warehouses full of them in France. So all the other furs value went up and the beavers went down. As a matter of fact, they recalled all of the licensed fur traders. They had them come back to Montreal. They tried getting the unlicensed fur traders to come back. They offered them an amnesty. And to be an unlicensed fur trader, you were considered to be a coureur de bois, or a walker of the woods. They had no reason to come back. As a matter of fact, the French government started rumors that they didn't start the rumors, the coureur de bois started the rumors. They told the coureur de bois if they were caught trading without a license, the first offense, you would be publicly flogged and branded with the fleur-de-lis. Second offense was life on the galleys, which wasn't very long. But. So the response from the coureur de bois was to tell the natives that all the trade goods coming out of New France were boxed. They're going to make you sick. Because they started trading with the English and the Dutch, including firearms.
So there was regulation on fur trade even.
Oh, big time.
Wow.
Big time. Huge, huge contracts. If you went up country, you had to sign a contract. You had to have a congé or a trade license. The problem with the congé system was that the congé was good for 15 months. You had 15 months to take one canoe with 3 people, go up country, make contact with the natives, conduct your business, and get back to Montreal. Once you've had a congé, you are no longer able to get another congé. So who do you imagine is going to be the next coureur de bois? That's a puzzler. You've already been up country. You've already made your contacts. When it gets dark, we're jumping in the canoe. We're heading up country.
Is Hudson Bay Company in existence at this point? Or?
Absolutely. Hudson Bay was founded, believe it or not, by 2 Frenchmen, Grossier and Radisson. And that is in the 1660s. Grossier and Radisson went up country without a congé, without permission, but they were exploring. They had contact with the Chippewa, they had contact with the Sioux, they had contact with the Cree. They went all the way up to Green Bay. They were gone for 2 or 3 years. They come back with canoe loads of furs. They had so many furs, they hired some of the natives to paddle the extra canoe loads of furs back with them. And when they got back, they were greeted, and all their furs were taken from them because they didn't have a congé. There you go. Spent 3 years for nothing. So they tried talking the French government into setting up a trading post up north. And the French government said, yeah, no, we're going to have them bring their furs to us. All right. There's not a whole lot of water between France and England. They took a boat ride over to England, asked them, would would they like to set up a fur trading post? Yeah, love to.
So you just needed a big enough fish to back your...
Absolutely.
Wow, that's interesting.
Hudson Bay is the longest operating company in the world. It's still in business today. It's called the Bay now. France didn't take real kindly to this. As a matter of fact, for a very short period of time, the French did go up there. They did take 2 or 3 of the posts from the English and a ship. But eventually they gave it back. But they weren't happy about it. So, now we are up to the American Revolution. This is a copy of a gun that was called the Committee of Safety gun. You got your 13 original colonies. Each colony had a Committee of Safety. Committee of Safety was responsible for providing firearms to the militia. This one, there's a PP right there engraved into the barrel. There's a PP on either side of the trigger guard. Pennsylvania property. Who can guess what colony this was made for? There you go. This is a very good copy of an original Committee of Safety gun. We talked about them reusing barrels, reusing gun parts. This happens to be an original barrel from a Charleville. I had a young man walk up to me at a show, ask me if I'd like to buy a barrel. I said, no offense, young man, but I make my own barrels for my guns. All right, well, thank you anyways. But a half hour later, he come back. I'm sick of dragging this thing around this show. Give me $40 and it's yours. Can't make one for that. This barrel had been converted to percussion by the method they used to convert it. They drilled a hole in the top of the barrel and they bent the cock around to the side. It wasn't a good conversion, but it was a conversion. So I cut it off right at the nipple, rethreaded it for a new breech plug. And I made this gun at a Living History reenactment, a week-long event, with all 18th century tools. No electricity was used in the manufacture of this. And I shot it at that event. So that's your Committee of Safety. This is the gun that won the American Revolution for the Americans. There were rifles prior to the American Revolution. I was doing some research recently on the attack at Hudson Bay that we just talked about. 2 of the 100 guns that they shipped up there for the military to take the bay were rifled. We're talking in the 1670s. But during the American Revolution is where the rifle came in to its own. American riflemen are basically what won that war for us. They would snipe British officers 200-300 yards. Yeah. I mean, most of your infantry were carrying smoothbore muskets. And I know If you talk to anybody that's got a PhD, they're gonna tell you these things weren't accurate past 25 yards. I beg to differ. I took a deer this year with that matchlock at 60 yards offhand. That's a smooth bore, 69 caliber. Don't tell me they're not accurate. We shoot on a regular basis at 50 yards. We never fail to hit the target. We might not score as well as we'd like to. We never fail to hit the target. But a smooth bore is not going to be an accurate gun at 200 yards. That's where your rifle comes in. When they're talking about a rifle, the main differences are musket has one sight. And this one isn't even really a sight, it's a bayonet lug used as a sighting aperture. Your rifle will have two sights, a front sight and a rear sight. The main difference is most, not all, of your rifles are a smaller caliber. This one happens to be a 50 caliber. This is my grocery getter. And there's grooves, lands and grooves cut in the barrel in a spiral. So when that ball comes out of the muzzle, it's spinning. Like you see a major league pitcher throwing a baseball and he gives it that twist and that, you see the seams spinning. Well, that's basically what you've got happening with your rifle. That's why it's more accurate at long range. And yes, I have taken deer 100 yards, more than once. So, yeah, don't let anybody fool you. These things are accurate. Any questions here?
What's the wood on your grocery getter?
That is tiger stripe maple. And that's very common with the Americans, very common. Even some of the muskets, one of the next ones I want to build is stocked in curly maple.
Because it was readily available, that was a
Not necessarily,
or
not
easier-
necessarily.
Better to work with as far as.
I worked at a lumber yard for 28 years, and funny thing, carpenters would come in and they'd want a piece of maple. I'd pull out a nice piece of curly maple. They're like, I don't want that. It's all right, I got a guy. One phone call and it's gone. They don't know the difference between plain maple. That's plain maple. That's plain hard maple. There's not an ounce of figure to that gun. That's an infantryman's gun. This is a rifleman's gun. He's going to take pride. He's going to take care of this. He's going to sleep with this. Seriously. In the rain, he would have an item called a cow's knee. It would be oiled leather, shaped to fit over the entire lock and tied on. So if they're out in wet weather, their firearm is still going to go off. It's still dependable. You can do that with a flintlock, not so much with a matchlock. It just really doesn't work. Hopefully that's not for me.
I have a question.
Sir?
The twist rates on the rifling, were those like well thought out, or was it just whatever the tooling would do?
I've got friends that do rifle barrels. And I worked with them down at Friendship, Indiana, at the National Muzzleloader Rifle Association. And they have two major events down there each year. And I work in a place called Gun Builders Hall, kind of self-explanatory. And it's all different types of gun builders. And one of the gentlemen does rifling, one of the guys does reaming of the barrels. And then the rest of us do some sort of assembly of the firearms. So the point I'm trying to make is that the piece of metal or piece of wood that they run through the guide, it's just a piece of metal that they heated up in a forge and gave it a twist. And whatever it comes out as far as I can see.
Yep. It's a perfect answer to the question.
Yeah,
It's just,
well, I do have a rifle at home that's rifled by one of these gentlemen, and it's called a gain twist, where at the breech it starts with a slower twist, and as it comes towards the muzzle it gets faster. It can be good and it can be bad. If you want to shoot long range, you can't up your powder charge to make that ball go, because then you're just negating your gain twist. You're just firing it right past that rifling. It doesn't work. But if you're going to shoot 25 and 50 yards with it, you're golden. You're golden. You use a light charge. That's the beautiful thing about it. Gain twist. Saves powder. Absolutely. Absolutely. Sir.
So I guess I kind of have two questions. I'll try to make it one. So what was it to discover that, like, okay, if we put grooves in the barrel, that's going to make it work? Like, because I know, like, in the 1700s, people were like crazy smart. I mean, we had our first submarine in the 1700s.
They had rifles before they got to this continent.
Okay.
Were they common? No.
Okay.
No.
So
They're very, very expensive.
Oh, so they were around prior.
Oh yeah, like I said, the group that went up and took Hudson Bay in the late 1600s had two rifles. There were rifles around during the Matchlock period, but only the very wealthy had them.
Okay.
The commoner's not going to have it. The commoner's lucky to have a Matchlock.
Okay. So the advancement was very rapid with firearms. It's just accessibility was the issue.
We're going to cover that here with the locks when I get to this case. Yeah, we're going to get there. All right. I'm not fast. I'm not slow, but I'm not fast. We'll get there. But we're going to get right to the end of the fur trade here. This is a copy of a Willets. Willets is one of the gun makers for the King of England. For Hudson Bay. This is copied right off the original again. And you can see how the gun is lightened up, but the thing you got to remember now, the fur trade is moving west. So that means you're not traveling by canoe anymore. You're traveling by horseback. So a lighter, shorter gun is going to be more advantageous. This is a chief's grade. It's got a silver medallion with a chief on it. This is a chief's grade Willets. I've made the regular Willets also, but it's without the silver wrist medallion. There were approximately 7 or 8 gun building companies that were making guns specifically for Hudson Bay. I don't do a lot in that time period. Obviously, I do a great deal more with the French because, well, let's face it, we don't have too many mountains here in Michigan. So, well, bless Lewis and Clark, they paved the way for us. And a lot of the guys that went with Lewis and Clark, as soon as they got back, they turned around and went right back west and became mountain men. Now during that time period, you've got another thing going on, more rifles. The Hawken brothers. Yeah, I had Hawkins. They're very accurate. Another good grocery getter.
Where were they from, the Hawken?
Missouri. Right they were right there when you were heading out west. As soon as you got across the Mississippi, you saw the Hawkins and then you went west. Okay, we're gonna timeline you now with the gun locks. What we've got going on here, this is a 1665 French lock. It's almost straight across the bottom, round face, very sharp pointed tail. 1665 is the first white men overwintering in the Great Lakes, Grossier and Radisson. So that's where we're starting. This is 1670. A little more banana shaped, a little wider, still that sharp pointed tail. That's an original. 1680, a little more banana shaped. A little narrower, still with that sharp pointed tail. 1690, real banana shape. Tail's getting drawn out a little bit more, a little more graceful. By 1700, we're going to a flat lock plate. This particular one was for probably either for a wall gun or for a buccaneer due to the size. But the lock configuration remains the same. On the English side, they started flat. This is a dog lock. The dog lock doesn't have a half cock on it. So you pull it back until the dog catches, that's your half cock. You only have a full cock. Here we have a Dutch pistol lock. Kind of unique. And here we have a 1750 Saint-Étienne. I believe this would be the south side of a double barrel, due to the screw locations that held the lock to the gun.
Were double barrels common?
They weren't common, but they are listed. Indeed, they're listed, and they're expensive.
Who would have been carrying a double?
Somebody with a lot of money. Either that, or, once again, they did make Chiefs grade guns. They make a nice gift. And then we even have wee little pistol locks. Now going back to Grossier and Radisson in 1665, they give a complete list of all the firearms that they took on their little 3-year jaunt. And in that list, they list a brace of pistols and a brace of pocket pistols. We know these firearms are not matchlocks. They didn't make pocket pistols in a matchlock. They have to be flintlocks. So, any questions now?
Was there a particular reason they couldn't put a pistol lock onto a rifle? I mean, it still makes a spark. And Was it just because the components were
You-
so small they would break?
It can be done, it can be done. Due to the size and the throw, what's called the throw of the cock. So there's half cock, there's full cock. You only got about 5/8 of an inch of throw on that. Not much spark. Yeah. Yeah, this would have been on this lock would have been on a pocket pistol. The pocket pistol's only accurate from me to him. We have a duel at our family event. Bear with me. You're not shooting at each other. You walk down to a paper cutout, you walk back away from it, you turn, and at the drop of the handkerchief, you shoot at the paper cutout. Whoever shoots first has the opportunity to win if they hit the target. If you don't hit the target, then your opponent has the opportunity. If you don't bring your own pistol, we have a pocket pistol for you to use. 9 out of 10 times, the pocket pistol fails to hit the target. And we're talking 10 cases.
So it's like a contact pistol?
Pretty much, it's what you bring to a knife fight.
Yeah.
You know, and like I said, you're basically across the card table. You know. So.
With such a short throw, did they regularly fail to fire at all?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's more of an intimidation thing than. Yeah. To be honest with you, all the reading I've done, I've never come across a first source document where somebody was actually killed by a pocket pistol. Haven't found it yet.
So would your typical trapper or fur trader carry some type of pistol as well as
Yeah, they were common.
just for
Yeah.
extra firepower, if nothing else?
Well, yeah. I mean,
2 shots versus the...
to load, especially one of these long barrel guns, you know, to load it, you've got to measure your powder. You have to measure your powder. If you don't measure your powder, how do you know how much powder you're putting down here? You don't. So you measure your powder, pour it down, patch and ball, we ram that out, push it all the way down. Now where's your primer? Priming horn. Half cock, prime it. A good muzzleloader can get 2 shots off a minute. With the military using the cartridges, they could get 3 shots off. They were using the paper cartridges in what's called a belly box. Belly box is a piece of wood inside of a leather envelope. It's worn on your belt. Pull the flap up, pull the cartridge out. You have to have 3 teeth on the opposing teeth. Yeah, on the same side of your mouth. Okay? Tear it open, grab the tail in your teeth. Not tooth, teeth. Prime. Close your pan. Pour the rest of the powder down, turn it around. The ball is in a paper cartridge. Push the whole business in, ram it home. Now you're loaded. That's how you can get 3 shots off in a minute.
Did it get progressively harder to load each time you loaded? I mean, like,
Yeah.
say you shot, yeah, because I know, and I, just a recreational, but I have a replica and I deer hunt with it. I use true black powder.
Certainly.
And after I shoot one time, You know, it's.
Well, there's
it's considerably-
ways to alleviate that, and I can help you with that. What brand of putter are you using? Do you know?
Go X.
Okay, GoX is good. Swiss is better. Swiss is cleaner. It's hotter. I use Swiss in my rifles. I use GoX in my smooth shooters. Next, what lubricant are you using?
Or butter?
Throw it away. We use the same thing to lube our patches on our rounds that we use to clean the gun. That way, you're not going to build up fouling. I can shoot a 21-shot woods walk without having to swab my bore. And we use a product that we make ourselves. It's Murphy's oil soap, hydrogen peroxide, and rubbing alcohol, equal. 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. It does take all the oil out of your bore. You do have to pay attention to use a very good quality oil on your bore, or your bore will rust.
After the shooting's done?
Well, yeah, when you're done shooting, clean it very well with that same mixture. And then I use ballistol on my bores.
Say that again?
Ballistol, it's a shooter's oil. It's like $20 for a pint. But that will take care of your problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions?
I have a question. You said these are trade and hunting guns. I've heard of squirrel guns. Is that a different
Squirrel gun is,
year or just the barrel? Most of them that I've heard of are like octagon barrels that are very heavy.
yep, rifles. Rifle. A squirrel gun is going to be like a 32 or a 36 caliber rifle. You're going to find a lot of those like down in Tennessee, Kentucky. Kentucky guns did get up here during the War of 1812. Down at Frenchtown, south of Detroit, the vanguard for the Americans were all Kentucky volunteers. So Michigan has real strong ties with Kentucky, and we still do. At our annual winter camp that we hold just south of here, a handful of Kentucky boys come up every year. So we're still tight with Kentucky. But yeah, that be like my rifle there, but with a much smaller bore. That does have the octagon barrel, making it heavier. But if you're target shooting, a heavy barrel is better than a light barrel. Heavy barrel is going to sit. A light barrel, you're going to be wandering. So when it comes to shooting a rifle, I like a little meat on the bone.
Thank you.
Anybody else? There's going to be a quiz. You can't go home until you pass it.
I guess my follow-up question, because I had to give her a little intermission, but.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm curious, what would you say is the earliest we start seeing the group more? So we see it really start to become something that's happening in America in a sense, at the revolution, we're seeing more commoners getting access to the high tech.
Oh, absolutely. Well, on both sides, too.
Okay.
The British hired Hessians. You know, George Washington's little trip across the Delaware, taking out the Hessians.
Yep.
They were carrying a short-barreled rifle, large caliber,
Germans in their large.
Jäger. They're called the Jäger, and Jäger translates to hunter.
Wow.
But yeah, that's how a lot of the rifles came by way of the Hessians. And then, and then that also goes through a transition similar to these guns going through transition. You'll hear the term the transitional Jaeger. The Jaeger, a lot of the Jaegers only had a 30-inch barrel.
Whoa.
Yeah. But then you start seeing them 34, 36, 38, 40. It's 40 inches. Now you have a transitional Jaeger. They're starting to transition into more of what the Americans wanted. And a lot of the Hessians after the war stayed, even though they lost.
Okay, that's cool. I actually did not know that. That is.
Classes in session.
Well, it had been raining so much, from what I saw, who's it, Jeff Daniels made a movie on this subject.
I've seen it.
And doesn't he talk about one man on the American side put a lot of wax over his pan?
I can't say that they did that. I have not found.
That's
Hollywood-
the only person that was killed, they said.
No,
was
no
the
Americans,
boss.
no Americans were killed.
No, but the only person that was killed was the head of the Hessians. Nobody was killed, except by that one rifle, and they
Right.
had to have, who was it, Hamilton, go in with his sword to kill the outpost people?
Yeah, but Hollywood tends to take poetic license on
I think that's in
things.
Michigan. But,
Yeah, no,
I mean, the
yeah,
production.
I've got friends that have been in some of the movies, and they call them out if they're doing something wrong, and their response is, this is a movie, this is not a documentary. They don't care about history. They care about the money.
Well, this is, I think, a Michigan production that was
It
documentary.
doesn't matter. They still take poetic license.
Okay.
So at that point, I'm going to send you to the library to get a book.
Okay.
These are my reference books. These aren't near all my reference books. Your librarian will be proud of the collection of books that I have. These particular books have only to do with these firearms. I'd need another truck to carry all the rest of my books. Sir?
How much, if you were a really good blacksmith gun maker, how much money could you make doing this as a trade for, not being a hunter, but just making it for the,
Now or then?
I don't know if you can convert it from then to now,
So then mostly.
but mostly then.
Mostly then. Well, all right.
It'd be
Well,
fun for the comparison.
here's a fun fact for you.
Yeah.
Grosser and Radisson came back in around 1668. As soon as they got back, they shipped, the French government, they shipped a gentleman by the name of Claude David up to Chegmagwan Point, Chegmagwan Bay. His livelihood was gunsmithing. Why did they send him up there when there wasn't a white man to be seen? The natives wouldn't trade for firearms unless they had a European there to show them how to operate it and to maintain it. Okay? Now, you want to put things in fast forward? Dig this. When LaSalle brought the Griffin, first sailing ship on the Great Lakes, they stopped at Fort de Bois, which is St. Ignace. This is in 1680. All the natives jumped in their canoes, paddled out, and they fired a salute to the ship. And they all had firearms. So we're going from 1668 to 1680. Where 1668, None of them have. 1680, they all have. There's documents of tribes taking all the furs that they harvested over an entire winter to Montreal and trading for nothing but firearms.
Wow.
All the cool kids had them. Oh yeah. So, I mean, that's how fast things are happening. From 1665 to 1700. I mean, look, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 different lock configurations from 1665.
That arms race is literally almost equivalent to like the modern tech thing. That,
Oh, big time.
Like, it's just
Big
everything, like we keep blowing ourselves out of the water.
Well, all right, you know, we can go back to 1650 with the wheel lock.
Yep.
The true flintlock's already been invented. It's not common, but it's invented. Now, with a matchlock, here's a fun fact for you. This is a 1675. In 1680, the French government sent 100 of this firearm to the French colonists. They immediately sent them back and requested 50 flintlocks instead. Tell your boss you don't want what he sent. So
was like, for my brain, so like almost a computer equivalent would be like they're getting two, or I mean like basically an older style computer, but they want laptops. Like, would that be the jump almost?
yeah, I mean, well, once again, things are just barrel rolling. The first military unit to show up with flintlock firearms is in around 1665, the Horrigan Saliers Regiment. And they came here from France, and they were sporting half flintlocks and half matchlocks. They were the first military unit to use a flintlock firearm on this continent. The French military used the matchlock up to 1700. But the guys that were up country trading, there's no way they're going to carry a matchlock and trade a flintlock. Not going to happen.
Yeah.
Not going to happen. So you can see how things are barrel rolling right in that very, very, very short window of time. Anybody else?
So is there theoretically a French company of soldiers carrying matchlocks could have come up to some natives that already had flintlocks?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. It could happen. Absolutely. Yeah, because the Iroquois were trading. The Iroquois got a little miffed at the French when Champlain kind of helped slaughter them all with the Hurons. They took offense to that. So they immediately started trading, the Iroquois started trading with the English and continued to do so. They finally signed a peace treaty with the French in 1701. Didn't stick, but they signed a peace treaty. So, but they're carrying English and Dutch firearms. Because the Dutch were out by Albany. But they called it Fort Orange. Dutch. Who'd have thought?
When did the beavers start to go? Was it around that end of that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the what you've got going on is they keep going further west. They keep getting trapped out, and that was another part of the Iroquois' problem. They were the furthest east, and they trapped all their beaver out almost instantly. So they started traveling west into the Great Lakes, trying to take over the Huron, the Potawatomi, the Chippewa, the Neutrals. They wanted to be the middlemen. Well, the French already had middlemen. They didn't need more middlemen. So that's where the big headbutting, and the Iroquois were hitting the French settlements, hitting them hard. That's why the Carrigan Salliers Regiment ended up here. As a matter of fact, the buccaneer, the fusil buccaneer, every sailing ship that came into New France, it was mandatory for them to hand over 15 of these as a docking fee. And if they didn't have the 15 buccaneer, the captain of the ship was held financially responsible.
Wow, so they were just.
They wanted to arm the general public to defend themselves against the Iroquois incursion.
Wow.
Now, the Rio Grande was found trapped out even for beaver.
The further south you go, the worse your hides are going to be.
They don't have the
If you go down to Louisiana, they're trading more for bear than for beaver. The beaver down there, they don't get that. If I had beaver skin here, I could show you. There's two different grades of hair on a prime beaver. Prime beaver is a good winter beaver, and the shiny guard hair is the hair you don't want. You want that fine underfur that they grow in the wintertime to stay warm. And if you look at that fine underfur under a microscope, it's barbed like Velcro, and that'll cling together. And that's yeah, they made felt, and the felt was made into hats. So the entire fur trade was based on fashion. Ta-da! Not to be a spoiler, but there you go.
Yeah, the silk hats came in. So.
Well, silk came in around 1840. But the beaver had all been pretty well trapped out from coast to coast by then.
Well, the mountain men, one of the things they did was they ditched all their Indian families.
Well, the French voyager, the truck driver of the 18th century, all the canoes came up country and they had to have people to paddle the canoes, hence the voyager. And they had a wife back in Trois-Rivières, in Montreal, in Quebec. But then when they got up country, well, they had a country wife too. Don't tell. But yeah, the voyagers had, they also had firearms. They were issued firearms if they didn't have one, but that came out of their pay. Because they had to defend themselves and they had to defend the cargo. It was so precious. Anybody else? All right, hand out the tests. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Feel free to come up and look at the stuff. Ask to touch.